Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Warsaw Podcast with me, Jan Darasz. You may be wondering what we're all about. Well, the clue is in the title. The podcast is about all things Warsaw, mainly history stuff, but anything that grabs my attention about this city, its history, food, architecture, humour, and personalities. It's a thinking person's city. A city that you have to employ a historical imagination to explore. But I'll be your guide. Now, what about me? From my accent, you may be able to tell that I'm English, Northern English. But from my name, I'm Polish. I was born, raised and educated in the UK from Polish parents. I'm the post-World War II generation. So, for all you history nerds out there, or for those who aren't, but secretly want to be, let's get right away into things. I could have started with Warsaw's palaces or its modern skyscrapers, but instead I'll start from the ground, or rather the ground up, the sewers. Drip, drip, drip. Drip, drip, drip. It all drips away in the end. Money, booze, luck, looks and time. Water too is a funny thing, water. You can't quite put your finger on it, although you can be in it. Try and pick it up and it trickles through your fingers, yet 1 billion gallons can destroy civilizations. We'll start at the start, where Warsaw gets its water from. If you walk around the city, you can get a clue from the names of the streets. Some carry the names of ancient and now underground streams: Żurawia, Tamka, Kamionek Szeroki, and Wąski Dunaj. Others are more descriptive: Bagno, bogside; Śliska, slippery; Dobra, good street in Powiśle, is called good because it was dry. The Nalewki district is called after the late medieval water cisterns, nalewki, to pour out. These reflect the physical topography of the city, perched on a 30-metre high escarpment on wet plains, from which flowed rivulets down to the Vistula. Old Queen Vistula herself shifts around over time. For much of Warsaw's history she flowed right under the escarpment. Warehouses on the old town were sited to pluck and deliver goods directly. Gardens of the royal castle came down to the water's edge. Check Canaletto's famous panorama here. If you are standing and waiting for a tram at Plac Bańkowy, you can see Fat Katie, no woke term yet. It's 18th century architect Szymon Zug's well. Stands between the tram lines. It's been there since the 18th century and is one of the few survivors. Warsaw's magnificent Great Synagogue stood in front of it, and Fat Katie survived the blast when it was blown up in 1943. Rather like the Victorian postbox in Manchester after the IRA bombing in 1996. Have a closer look at the step dome and then go to his masterpiece on Plac Małachowski, namely the Church of the Holy Trinity. Tucked away on Zakroczymska Street is King Stanisław August's Spring. Its Gothic arches leave you with the impression that it's a wayside shrine, but I wouldn't drink from the water here though. Dotted about the place in between tower blocks are public springs where you can fill up. Gothic-y elements usually characterise them. One lady used them because she distrusted the tap water. So much for the water coming in or through the city, but the waste had to be disposed of, and this problem is what made Warsaw rather unhealthy. Waste was dumped for centuries downstream. Solid waste and rubbish was dumped next to the royal castle, on Gnojna Góra, Dung Hill, beloved now of tourists. It used to be thought that being buried to the bottom lip in this stuff cured any number of diseases, probably by fright. Napoleon, when he entered Warsaw in 1806, reportedly gazed over the Vistula and snorted, "Merde." Diarists reported heaps of waste piled high in the streets. Solid rubbish was used as a compost for the many gardens and allotments. In the 19th century, Warsaw became a city in the Russian Empire, the third most important behind Moscow and St. Petersburg. It hosted a large garrison, as well as a burgeoning urban workforce, crammed into its narrow, unhealthy streets. Clearly something had to be done. Now we come to the Cathedral of Canals. The filtri, the filters, and the men behind them, Sokrates Starinkiewicz and William Lindley. The filters, the water purification plants, as the name implies, are a masterpiece of late Victorian engineering. Coming into land at Warsaw, you can see a couple of great landmarks, the Palace of Culture and a curious green rectangle just off centre that doesn't quite look like a park. At ground level, the bus that takes a visitor to the centre passes to the left of a huge empty space, with only a red brick tower visible. If you can get a better angle, you can see several low bunker-type structures covered in grass. All rather unprepossessing, but this is breathtaking stuff. In the 19th century, typhus and other diseases were frequent and deadly. The existing system was too weak and limited. The principle was the same: how to get a mass of water 30 metres up from the river, the highest point on the escarpment, clean it, and then distribute it. This was another Warsaw celebrity architect's method, Henryk Marconi. And you can still see the results in the Saxon Gardens, where the Tivoli-shaped folly is actually the first water tower. The Russian governor, Sokrates Starinkiewicz, in the 1860s decided that something must be done, and commissioned Brit William Lindley, one of the foremost sanitation engineers in Europe, to come up with a scheme for water purification and waste disposal for Warsaw. Starinkiewicz is one of those Russian, or rather Russo-Polish dignitaries honoured with a bust of himself, not something that is usually bestowed on a Russian militaryman here. William Lindley and his son William Heerline Lindley, a veritable sewer-building dynasty, with their handiwork being seen around the Russian Empire and all over Europe, set to work in the 1880s. Pre-steam age, this sort of thing would have been impossible. From the riverbank at Czerniaków, a huge steam pump took water from filters hundreds of metres long called dragons. This was then pumped more or less directly and underneath Nowowiejska Street to the filter area. Once there, it had to be cleaned. The Lindleys designed 6 underground filters, bricked and vaulted like a Gothic cathedral. They are astonishing feats of architecture and completely hidden, still, cool, mysterious and eerie. Here the water went through sand, gravel and charcoal, the same principle that we have in our kitchens, and was then pumped up a 40-metre high water tower, the one that you can see from ground level, from where gravity again forced the water into the mains. Basically 2 pumps, a lot of sand and the laws of physics. Freedom is relative, gravity always absolute. Nowhere is this truer than in Warsaw. Waste was dealt with in a similar fashion. Gravity and water down to a collector by the river and then pumped to a filter in Bielany, the northern district. It was then reintroduced back into the Vistula. The building of the sewers caused some opposition amongst the property owners of Warsaw, as they thought that the sewers would deprive them of a natural fertiliser for their market gardens. Recycling, zero waste, 19th century style. Praga, across the river, had its own system, smaller and more reliant on pumps rather than gravity. The incidence of typhoid, a frequent and endemic scourge, was greatly reduced. The city, while never belonging to the most pristine, became cleaner and more habitable. The urban poor were still poor, the rich still rich, so these problems remained. But clean water and the pavement cafe, the twin pillars of any modern urban civilization, were here to stay. It's impossible to imagine any sort of town life without them. Lindley's system was so good and his foresight so extensive that this system lasted until well into the 20th century and today. There was an excess capacity that was envisaged in the initial building. Thus, in the 30s, a pressurised water pumping station was built on site, just to speed things up a bit. The finish: Carrara marble instrument panels, Art Deco dials, beautiful cubist reliefs of the Warsaw Mermaid outside. Impressive. The water engineers were the rock stars of their day, and the filters encouraged a new technocratic elite that channeled that restless Polish energy into building rather than insurrection. Certainly, it was an epic tale, building the modern pyramids downwards. The city had to be surveyed first. Warsaw seems to defy any systematic attempts at planning, and the survey gave us much information about the 19th century city and its expansion. The drawings and plans themselves are superb examples of the draftsman's craft. elegant and precise. Craft or maybe an art, but certainly lost in the epoch of CAD. The devil is in the detail as usual. The mains were laid 2 meters below ground, so below the ambient winter freezing levels. Special porous bricks were inserted periodically to wick away moisture from the deep cellars. The shape of the sewers themselves was that of an inverted egg, to permit easier inspection and water flow. If you were a brickmaker, like Kazimierz Granczów for instance, a fortune awaited with the construction of the sewers and the fortress buildings. Later, during the uprising in 1944, the sewers would be used as escape and communications routes. But this is a separate story, as is that of Polish capitalism in the 19th century, and yes, it does exist. The system has vastly expanded, chiefly with the building of a second Fat Katy that is plonked in the middle of the river and draws its water from beneath the riverbed, as well as with brand new filters north of the city. All to bring us the humble drop of H2O to quench or waste. Go to the filters if you're in Warsaw and the place is holding one of its open days, and see these underground Victorian cathedrals, and marvel at the technology, the sweat and the ingenuity that gave us our daily water. Cheers, and do join me for next week's podcast. I'm Jan Darasz. See you then. Thank you very much for listening, and I do hope that you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Jan Darasz. Join me for the next one on Warsaw's fascinating history. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.